It's that time again, huh? It's hard to believe it's already been a year. Feels like I blinked and all of a sudden chapters 3 and 4 of Deltarune are old news. Probably doesn't help that I've been pupating for the past year or so. Did you miss me? I missed me. I didn't realize how much I missed this. The excitement, the dread. Making hours upon hours of preparations, kind of losing my mind in the process. I can sense a shift on the horizon. I'm sure many of you do. Questions answered, answers crumpled up and tossed out. The days of a pre-Chapter 5 world are coming to a close. So I'd like to take this time between times to speak my thoughts on Deltarune. Let the wrong ideas have their day in the sun, and let the right ideas come to fruition so you may bask in my clairvoyant brilliance as always. Yeah, let's just get into it, alright? We don't have all week. Replaying Deltarune to get footage for this video has been a really great chance to meditate on little details I never really put too much thought into, if I even noticed them at all. Like, this little plushie that you get if you give Susie a present, and Browsey can fly, I guess? I don't really know what to say about this. Is there a reason characters just start flying sometimes? But I'm gonna focus on things that I find real implication-y. First order of business, time is squishy in Deltarune. One player might experience in minutes what another player experiences over the course of hours, but that sequence of events still occupies a quantifiable amount of time within the story. I mean, for a story-driven game, that's par for the course, and for the most part, it's hardly even worth bringing up. For the most part. So, in practice, Chapter 1, Kris and Susie enter the Dark World at the start of class, go on a long, grueling adventure. They return to the Light World early enough that the sun hasn't set, but late enough that class has been over for hours. And Kris chooses to go to bed as soon as they get home, meaning in the story the adventure took like all day. 8 hours at least. In Chapter 2, Kris and Susie enter the Dark World shortly after class gets dismissed, go on a long, grueling adventure, then once again return to the Light World right before the sun sets and fall asleep pretty soon after. This isn't the weird part, like, there are infinitely many acceptable reasons this could line up, like maybe they were unconscious for a little longer. It's not big enough of a deal to actually have impact on the story. The thing that bugs me is, okay, at the end of Chapter 2, Toriel phones the police. Everyone and their grandma figured, alright, so Undyne's gonna show up in Chapter 3. Honestly, I thought that Undyne was gonna be a fake out for the night. That's not really what happened. What actually happens in Chapter 3 is Kris and Susie wake up in the Dark World. They have a pretty long, mostly chill adventure, at least long enough that halfway through everyone's like, alright, we should stop wasting time and seal the fountain. They fight Terra. The Roaring Knight shows up, beats the shit out of everyone. The police arrive. So, how long did this adventure take? The best I could do was 2 hours. That's like skipping all the extra content. I would accept that by the way of some JoJo-esque temporal vortex, this adventure takes 1 hour. But the police are 1 minute away on foot. So, was she showering? Did something else come up in the town where the only existing crimes are either the secret government ones or the ones you fabricate to get your friend to stay over? Was it actually Napstablook who took the call and then just neglected to ever mention it again? I don't think so. And I cannot suspend my disbelief enough to not smell something proportionally pretty fishy going on here. The only two explanations I can think of is that what the hell? Who the fuck is Diane? Either Undyne was very deliberately being stalled so that she couldn't get too involved in the Dark World, or Undyne knows Toriel's night intruder and slash chires weren't a real threat. It's already been spelt out that the police are in on this to some extent. And to her, this phone call was probably just confirmation for her or whoever else was listening in that Kris was doing their job. I don't really know what possessed her to show up at the end of this chapter at all, honestly. Maybe just to have an alibi? My point is, this is weird, and that is almost definitely not the radiation talking, and I would not be surprised if Undyne just showed up in Chapter 5 completely unfazed. When it comes to the weird shit that adults get up to in this game, honestly, I don't think anything could surprise me. Speaking of adults, it's time to talk about it. Can we please talk about this, please? Like normal people with normal words, some of which are neither roaring nor night. I have had such a tumultuous relationship with this sentence. I went from thinking it was just a mundane observation to an indicator of who the knight is to something non-specific but vaguely important to the plot to really just a completely mundane observation that for some reason causes people to have macabre hallucinations to apparently something that's so important it's worth pointing out twice. So yeah, we should probably at least try to suss out what the significance of this is. The thing that made me fall back into this rabbit hole was a really very innocuous piece of dialogue near the beginning of Chapter 2, where Susie rhetorically asked what Noelle was thinking messing in their dark world. Aside from the really bizarre wording, this grabbed my attention as a veteran of the whole Kris Knight debate, with the lingering assumption that like 50% of the fandom thinks whoever created the dark world in Chapter 2 hid inside the closet in the computer lab and made a dark fountain after Noelle and Birdley had already sat down, hence why their books are neatly set on the table after they returned to the light world, because that was the only explanation, I guess. Susie here lampshading Noelle's decision to enter the ominous darkened computer lab with such conviction makes me think that the whole hiding in the closet thing is such a non-starter idea that Toby didn't even consider it as he was writing this chapter. And that led me to the fact that we don't really know why the person-sizedness of a closet has to be brought up once, let alone twice. My best guess is, okay, well the thing is with these two closets is that they're one of only two doors in the room that they connect to. The unused classroom has the door to the supply closet and the door outside. And the Dreamer household has a door to the bathroom downstairs and the door to two bedrooms upstairs. The closets in the computer lab and the church are the only things preventing those rooms from being dead ends. Forget the flavor text. Why did either of these have to be here? Because what this communicates is that the site for a dark fountain must have at least two doors, not even two exits, just doors leading into spaces that could fit a person. Why? And I don't think it's part of the physics of Dark World, so it has to be a requirement for the person creating the fountain. And the most obvious answer I could come up with, and the one you probably already thought of, is that the knight needs a hiding spot. Once they make the dark fountain, they know that if it's sealed and they're in the room with everyone else, their cover's blown. And they don't just bail because their job probably isn't exclusive to making the dark fountain, and they can't hide in the room they came in from because anyone could just come in and complicate things. The important thing is that the dark world makes a barrier between them and the entrance to the building. That's what makes the perfect hiding spot, and I guess they need that. In the case of Chapter 4, that just confirms everyone's suspicions that at the end of the adventure, the knight's just chilling in the proverbial, but also literal closet, waiting until the coast is clear. But this isn't a perfect explanation, is it? Because in Chapter 2, there is no knight. There's just a big empty room and a person-sized closet with the door wide open and no large person to be seen. If the answer to the two-door problem is that the knight needs a hiding spot, where is the knight here? Oh. Okay. Well, alright, that's terrifying. Alright, listen, this one isn't really about something I noticed in the game. This is just a pattern I noticed, and I don't want to go through another chapter where I see Kris do some new unexpected and messed up thing, think to myself, they must be doing this unexpected and messed up thing for an unexpected and messed up reason, only for the intellectuals among us to decide that if Kris even did the unexpected and messed up thing, it was for a familiar and chill reason. Kris didn't go rogue and pull out a knife because they had something significant to do without the player's surveillance. They just wanted to go eat some pie. Haha! Kris didn't make a dark fountain at the end of Chapter 2 because they're affiliated with the knight or something. They just wanted to try out the cool life hack they learned today. And most importantly, at the end of Chapter 3, when you defeat the knight, Kris doesn't down Susie and Ralsei to defend the knight from them or to signal their loyalty because they're a good little protagonist and they would not do that. Not little Kris couldn't be precious Kris.
My client is in it. This is the end of the video.
This is the thing that pisses me off, and I've had enough. I get it. People mischaracterizing Undertale and Deltarune characters is annoying. I mean, honestly, I don't even know if it's as annoying as people make it out to be, or if they're just expecting a disproportionate amount of media literacy out of edgy 12-year-olds on the internet, but yeah, it's annoying. And I think people have taken their disdain for the trenches of Ralsei as evil and overcorrected into the pits of nobody has been or ever will be different morally from how they currently appear, operating under the assumption that this is the correct way to view the source material, because here's the thing. Deltarune fans that are old enough to have opinions like this are Undertale fans. And Undertale is the game where the two most morally reprehensible beings in the main cast are actually nice, cute babies that were just stupid by accident, and the only character in the game with any real evil in their heart was you, for downloading this game in the first place for free on your poor grandma's 12-year-old computer, and now instead of Google, you get sent to coolsearch.info or some shit whenever you open Firefox. And I feel like when the nobody is truly evil sentiment carried over from Undertale into Deltarune, it got a little lost in translation, and now, if I can be honest, some of you guys are cowards. Now, if you know me, and if you know my art, I like a shithead. It's a little embarrassing how much I just love myself a real fucking asshole. I like to see a story where someone has a bad thought and it makes them do a bad thing for a bad reason. I like to see a person be a person in beautiful and catastrophic ways. And I think Kris would not do that theory, which is what it's called now, is a monument to many people's cowardice towards that kind of storytelling. And it sucks to focus so much on the fact that a villain can have a good thought and make a good decision and live a good life, and miss the other side of that sometimes the people you trust fail and aren't really perfect, and seeing that as just as cathartic and sometimes a little uncomfortable. And fuck man, art is not uncomfortable enough, and it hasn't been for a while. Let some angst exist in this game. Let these characters hurt the people they love. Let the emotion of that sit with you. Let yourself be scared of the things that scare you. And when Chapter 5 comes out and Kris starts the roaring or does whatever unexpected and messed up thing they do, let people say whatever they have to say about it, okay? Because honestly, if nothing else can persuade you, your track record for actually ending up being right is not pristine. Yeah, I think maybe Kris did the. I think maybe the slashes here was Kris. It would be cool. And it makes sense. Yeah. Next thing. All right, moving on to the real important stuff. Chapter 4 gave us more answers and far more questions in regard to the prophecy than we ever could have anticipated. A lot of these questions are still very heavily speculated on for very good reason, and a couple I think are kind of overlooked for their implications. Everyone is aware of this bit near the beginning of Chapter 4. It's far from the only time a prophecy is this absurd and silly, and honestly the thing that it foretells is not that interesting to me. No, the thing I care about is the fact that Jockington is just in the prophecy. Not the snake or the sports boy or anything, just straight up his legal name. And I don't think a single other character gets name dropped in the prophecy, especially not a Lightner. Like, Asgore having his own nickname and portrait in there isn't as wild, although I think that should be talked about too. If this was something that only existed in the Dark World, I wouldn't have as much of a problem with it, but then the prophecy itself is the whole context for the religion within Hometown that has existed since the genesis of, at the very least, Gerson's writing career, and certainly before Jockington was born. So, what kind of pressure is that for a young man to be pushed into a prophesized existence? Does he have any autonomy in being Jockington, having this preordained definition which loomed over him before he even had the words to create something else? In fact, I can only imagine Jockington's father is also Jockington, just another bearer of this albatross in a line of poor children whose parents believed they would be the expected one. It makes sense to me why Toby would write this character as the prodigious athlete archetype, an identity already steeped with mountainous expectation. And I understand why Jockington has adopted such a disjointed manner of speaking, blighted with the knowledge of the profundity that hangs from his existence and from every word that leaves his mouth. Asgore at least had the luxury to choose to adopt this title, to mold it into this nauseating optimism that he carries with him in every moment, the knowledge that as long as he keeps giving away flowers, as long as his nature as the flower man is known by the people and by the gods, he's important. What he does can be important. Jockington never had the chance to decide how the light of importance would shape him, what sort of tool it would fashion him into. I don't know what this means for his character. I really want it to mean something. If nothing else, I appreciate that this deeper level to this otherwise wholesome, unserious part of the game even exists by accident. It feeds really well into this understated, existential, religious horror that pervades Hometown as a whole. And God, there's a lot of that in this game. Finally, it's time to talk about the weird route. Frankly, I could talk about this all day if I didn't feel the obligation to be coherent and original in my analysis. I was gonna hold off on playing through the weird route until the whole game was out for reasons I'll get into a little bit later, but I caved, and I played through what of it we have now, and even after watching from the sidelines so many times, I couldn't have expected how well it instills the feeling that you were doing a very reckless thing. Like you have your hands in the belly of a machine, pulling on cords and levers you know nothing about, flirting with irreparable collapse at any moment. Nothing encapsulates that better than in Chapter 4 when it becomes unshakably apparent. It happened. You broke it. Because of you, something is not how it should be, and the pieces can't be fit back into place. A lot of really great theories and ideas have been floating around in the past year about the half hour of differences that came with Chapter 4, and just what it means, what really happens to Noelle after you break down the last remaining sliver of her sanity, why, in a turn of events somehow so much more cruel and terrifying than we could have anticipated, she's not afraid, or upset, but grateful, even excited. The most popular explanation for this, and in turn for the pulsating red dot that continues to appear throughout, is that this isn't really Noelle, at least not entirely, and that somehow after the reapplication of the ring, a piece of our soul is now embedded there, influencing what Noelle thinks and what she says. If this were true, believe me, I would be all here for it. I don't think there's a single way the weird route could continue that wouldn't be just as immaculately devastating as I've come to expect. But I don't think Noelle being possessed here is the most probable or even the most fittingly horrific explanation there is for this moment. I think, as jeopardized as her mental state is, Noelle's thoughts are her own, and she is speaking with sincerity here. And my reason is, in simplest terms, Noelle goes to church, she sings in the choir, she is, if not devoutly religious, clearly knowledgeable about the religion. This and the whole Jockington thing relies on the assumption that the information within the church dark worlds is just as accessible in the light world, although I think that's a pretty safe assumption, and with that in mind, Noelle knows of the cage with human soul and parts, and she knows of the girl to which love will find its way. In this moment, Noelle must finally acknowledge that the fight to restore balance between light and dark is unfolding in real time, and in her proximity to Kris, she is a disciple. Maybe even the disciple. The same way she does in Chapter 2, she sees no choice here but to disembody herself from the part of her that fights back, and repaint her own collapse into a profound honor. She's exempt from guilt too, in a way, by accepting her actions not as blind cruelty, but as divine justice under the guidance and love of her God. Because she is a hero, she is safe from evil, and because she is strong, she is safe from death. And without death or the uncertainty of what is good and evil, there is no pain that could be inflicted upon her that would really, truly exist. So, why wouldn't she thank us? As for the red dot, what it is, if it's not a soul, I'm less sure of, but I have an idea. And for those sensitive to the discussion of self-harm, I would suggest skipping over this part. There is a very violent sequence that we bear witness to a few times within Deltarune when Kris rips out the soul. It's brutal. It's as if Kris is violating the natural boundaries of their own anatomy to do this. And in this moment, it appears to leave no wound behind, but there are traces of blood from what we could assume to be conflicts with the soul in the past. So I wonder if there is a mechanism that allows the soul to exit and enter Kris's body that requires some sort of intervention. Maybe it's just a door, a little pinprick hole that it can pass through like nothing, in spite of however much trouble the host may have reaching. So what I think is maybe love hasn't found its way to the girl quite yet. Maybe she's still, opening herself up to it. I apologize for how heavy some of this video has been. It's hard to think about Deltarune on the whole without getting a little dark. It's really fantastic in how it allows all of the darkness and the light to exist in your mind at once. And I want to talk about something that I think factors into how it accomplishes this. It's a type of structure that only games can really pull off. I can't really go into examples because discovering this structure is what makes these individual games so interesting. So I'll just say thanks to the Alan Wake franchise for putting this into words before I could. Most of the time, the structure of a game is just a line. It's a story. It's just a series of events that we as the player have the privilege of interacting with. Some games are a little wrinklier with little detours or alternate routes that take you the same end, and some games diverge into little independent paths. These are all games that end. Some games are a little more like circles. Arcade games, a couple of roguelikes, things where the end of the game is dependent on your skill or your attention span. And then, there are games that are a little like a tree and a little like a circle too, with, all sorts of alternate paths that all loop back into the same point until eventually you find the real way out. Then there are a couple of games that are like spirals. Like a circle, when you go back, it isn't a new story or a new path. You loop around it the same way every time, but you're not the same. You have knowledge now that you didn't on the first revolution, and now you see the game more for what it really is than you could then. And the more times you repeat yourself, the deeper into the spiral you fall, getting closer and closer to the center until maybe you finally reach it, or maybe you just fall until you lose interest. A lot of contemporary indie puzzle games love using this sort of structure. It really cultivates that intoxicating feeling you get when you peel back one layer and you find so much more underneath. I think Deltarune is one of many games to do this, but it's one of few to really watch you circling the drain. If Deltarune has one theme, it would be kind of shitty if it only had one theme, but if it had to choose, I think it would be misbehaving. Swimming against the tide, breaking the rules, disrupting the whole production, doing one thing simply because you were commanded to do another, looking for trouble because you were commanded to simply enjoy the ride. All of the main characters are rebels in their own way, especially us. We get rewarded for straying from the beaten path, usually with cute little flavor text, but sometimes with much grander consequences. And that's a big part of what makes Deltarune feel so alive. I don't think it's just good game design, I think it's kind of the point. The game knows how driven the player is by curiosity and playful rebellion because it's about those feelings. Toby has talked a little bit in the past about how Deltarune only has one ending, ellipses, ? And I'm not going to claim to know what this implies for the future of the game, but I have my own opinion. It's strange and maybe a little dubious, but ever since I really thought about the sword route in Chapter 3, it's kind of the only way that makes sense to me. The story of Deltarune doesn't have multiple endings because it's not told through the lens of Kris or the rest of the Lightners for whom events can just be repeated or erased. It's told through the lens of the player. Our story is not a big sprawling tree, it's very linear. It's just really a story of how our investment transforms. The 3 save files you have in the game and the 3 distinct routes you can take are parallel to what I would call the game's 3 acts. Act 1 is just the entirety of any other RPG. The heroes are called to adventure, they face hardships, they come out triumphant in the end, but then something's missing. You don't get the outcome you were hoping for. There are questions you still don't have the answers to, and loose ends you had the chance to tie up but never did. Act 2 begins. You choose to return to the story. The characters and the narrative are all the same, but you're different. You're no longer just invested, but determined. In the pursuit of knowledge or power or both, you push yourself to the limits of your patience. The shadow crystals and other secrets, which were previously just a passing interest, are now all that matters. You keep going deeper until you get everything. You get all the 5 crystals and make the pure crystal, the embodiment of your efforts. And maybe you even find all the eggs. And then for some reason or another, that's not enough. I imagine the shopkeeper, the one who set us on this whole side quest to begin with, telling us something interesting, maybe telling us that the pure crystal isn't the end. That if we wanted to make something truly incredible, something that could twist fate absolutely, a powerful enough form of ice magic could get us there. And then maybe you, still in Act 2, put the pieces together. The really funny thing about the sword route and all the little hints sprinkled in, Deltarune not only expects you to find, the forbidden path eventually, it really wants you to find it. So then it's on to Act 3. The logical conclusion of our arc, a player with such a sense of morbid fascination that they're willing to break something just to understand it. Deep enough into the spiral that you'll do something that mortifies you just to see where it all ends. And then you do. You break the sequence of events, you break the narrative, you break the characters. It really wouldn't surprise me if by the end of the weird route and the eye of the storm, the game just straight up froze. Honestly, I would be delighted. Because, the game doesn't end when the prophecy is fulfilled, or the knight is defeated, or Noelle fucking kills everyone or some shit. It ends when you get to the center of that spiral, and that drive to understand can no longer be fed. I refer to us and you in a partially fictional sense here, but goddamn if Toby doesn't know the kind of person I am to a T. Like Undertale was with, the RPG player's inclination to grind and make things easier for themselves. Deltarune is sort of a meta character study, if that makes sense, and a really fucking fascinating one. And I can only see it getting more and more fascinating as the game goes on. Well, I'm sure you can feel the last-minuteness of all of this. I hope in spite of that it was still interesting hearing my thoughts. It's just nice making a video again in so long. Rest assured, once Chapter 5 is out and I've had time to process it all, I'll be back with some more calculated opinions on Deltarune. Believe me, I am far from done talking about this game. Anyways, happy Deltarune tomorrow, everybody, and I hope to see you again soon. Also commission me, please.